Hey, so this video is a bit of a follow-up to my previous video where I talked about getting started with weather routing. Uh, I generally try to be pretty modest. Yeah, this is me being modest if you haven't noticed. LuckGrib is totally awesome, and I'm generally trying to let you decide, present the system to you, and have you realize its awesomeness. But I think it's worthwhile to emphasize a point of an example I showed in the previous videos. So I was showing a route between San Francisco and Hanalei on Hawaii. And the initial solution didn't generate a path, but the system did create this entire suite or an entire set of isochrones. And I spent some time, several minutes, looking through this set of isochrones and analyzing the results. And based on the strategy of the weather we had looked at earlier and the results of these isochrones, we ended up developing a strategy to, rather than follow the paths which are being suggested, because of all of these uncertainties, you can make very small changes in locations of cursor towards our destination to have the system generate quite different paths initially. We generated a strategy to prefer to head further south, and we added a constraint and made more solutions that kind of carried on. So there's a lot to say about that, and this video is going to talk a bit more about that. So I already mentioned that LuckGrib is unique in that it's the only isochronal weather routing system in the world which is able to that allows you to create these constraints where you're able to specify a point and leave it on your port or starboard side as you pass it. Before I introduced these in LuckGrib, I think people generally thought that it was an impossible thing. You couldn't combine constraints with isochronal weather routing solvers. Turns out you can. It's not easy, but you can. I think the more important point that I wanted to discuss is there are a number of systems which solve weather routing, but I don't think there are any other systems which allow you to explore the solution space in the way you can in LuckGrib. And it turns out that this is a critical part of many routes. And I don't say all, because there are some routes where the isochrones generated are fairly stable and uniform, and there are no discontinuities in them. But the thing is, you don't know which ones are which until you analyze the isochrones. After spending time analyzing the isochrones, you can classify them as being uniform, and the time you just spent wasn't necessary. Or you may find that the time you just spent analyzing the isochrones was critical to your making an important navigation decision. So there are a number of systems which don't allow you this freedom to explore this space. And I think you need to be able to do this in order to use these systems properly. For example, many systems generate paths as their primary output. They don't show you the isochrones as a way for you to explore what's been produced. So for example, if I go to an image which shows you the grib file, turns off the isochrone segments. Some systems show you wind barbs, not all of them. I'll turn off all of this stuff. So this is kind of what you'll see in many systems. There should be some way of locking the grib file, the weather data, with the vessel location along a path. But as we saw earlier, there's an important discontinuity towards Hanalei, where I was making very small changes in location and having dramatically different paths be generated. And I would challenge you to look at this solution, which is the information you'll be presented with in many of the competitors, and find that. Like, how do you know that there is an important discontinuity where a small change in location is a dramatic difference in the path? Keep in mind the weather data at this point is 15 days into the forecast. There is a lot of uncertainty over this weather data. And what is happening is that the decision of how to leave San Francisco is being determined by the weather data at the target 15 days into the forecast, which is kind of ridiculous. For example, if you use a system which is based on email, you may receive an email back again saying, here's the path to follow. And it may also give you some weather information, so you know what winds to expect. The weather data you have on board won't be the same, so there'll be no way for you to compare the weather you're in to the weather it used to generate the route. And generally, the weather you'll be in will be different from the route anyway, because forecasts aren't perfect even early in the forecast. So you'll be sailing along, noticing that the wind is different from the forecast winds, and how do you know what to do? Because if the winds are different because the forecast was inaccurate, then you may be wanting to head in a different direction. So you need to be able to analyze these things in much greater detail than you can through email. You need to be able to look at the isochrones, look at the solution space which the solver used in order to guide you with its path that it generates. If all you see is the path, you're losing a lot of information. So going back to the view that LuckGrib shows you, there are little points all throughout the solution space in this area of high weather model uncertainty, 8 and 7 days into the forecast, and you need to be able to explore these. It's important. Some competitors claim that their weather models are better, so I haven't heard them say that therefore you don't need to worry about it, but I don't. All weather forecasts, all weather models fall apart 15 days into them, and they all appear to be very good early in the forecast. So GFS is excellent for the first 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days, depending upon the weather system, where you are in the world, and so on. At some point, GFS uncertainty grows, and at 16 days, it's not useless, but you don't want to be making decisions based on a 16-day GFS forecast early in your passage. And that will be true of all weather models, not just GFS. So yeah, if you're using weather routing already, I would encourage you to think about that. You need to have ways to evaluate what the weather router is showing. If all you're doing is looking at a path, I would encourage you to reconsider. There are better options available now. If you aren't using weather routing yet, then yeah, LuckGrib is a good choice. I may be a little biased, but I think that bias is justified. So yeah, that's the point I was trying to make. Thanks for watching.